Jack Smith filed a response to Trump's request to indefinitely delay the trial, and you said that you were very pleased with how Jack responded to this. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I hope everybody will read this 10-page prosecution brief. It's double-spaced. It's an easy read. It's a quick read.
Right.
But boy, it's a model of clarity and brevity and persuasion. Jack Smith doesn't mince words, doesn't pull punches, and he clearly understands that justice is a full contact sport. The way he just virtually disemboweled Donald Trump's defense attorneys. He's like, you are wrong. You have things exactly backwards. And frankly, the motion that Team Trump filed had just one ask of Judge Aileen Cannon. Judge, don't set a trial date. And on page 1, Jack Smith said, look at the Speedy Trial Act, the very law that controls this issue. It says the judge shall set a specific trial date. Yep. I mean, so Team Trump could not have been made to look any more foolish. And maybe I'm a geek, but when I read those 10 pages, it got me excited about the trial, because I think, that is a sign of how Jack Smith's team, which includes some of my former homicide prosecutors, is going to go in and prosecute this case in a way that will really do a service to the American people.
Yeah, well, and I mean, so like one of the things that Trump's people were arguing was that they couldn't find a jury, and Jack Smith dissected that. He said that our jury system relies on the court's authority to craft a thorough and effective jury selection process, and on prospective jurors' abilities to willingness to decide cases based on evidence presented to them, guided by the legal instruction from the court. How do you think they're going to do with finding a jury down there in Florida?
I don't want to sound naive or Pollyanna, but, I picked juries for 30 years, and some of those cases were high profile. No, not as high profile as the Trump trial will be, but my experience is that jurors take very seriously their oath. They are sworn in, and when they're answering questions about their suitability to sit as a juror fairly and impartially, they are under the penalties of perjury. And they tend to tell the truth. But if they try to hide the truth, Travis, we can sniff it out. Prosecutors can, judges can, defense attorneys can, and the judge will excuse those people who may be trying to sneak on to kind of do Trump's nefarious bidding as a juror. So I think they're going to impanel a fair and impartial jury. And I think the evidence is going to be so overwhelming of Trump's guilt that jury will convict him. At worst, maybe there's a holdout. It's a hung jury. But the beauty of that is we get to retry the case and do it again and again and again. I've done as many as 4 trials in one case. And on the eve of the 5th trial, the defendant pleaded guilty to his crimes. There is no double jeopardy prohibition. There is no due process prohibition. If a jury hangs, you can try it as many times as your sense of justice will allow.
Okay, I love hearing that. And then there's been some talk about having there may be like a case in New Jersey, and they may file additional charges. Do you think that will have an effect on what happens with the case in Florida? Is it going to put a bigger spotlight on? Is it going to put Cannon in a spotlight if we have a decent judge who's not going to bat for Trump every time?
Yeah, what a wild card, right?
Yeah.
If we now see a federal indictment up in New Jersey for him, displaying national defense information in violation of our nation's espionage laws, if we see an indictment in Washington, D.C. for either the documents case, because he committed crimes there as well. That's where he stole the documents from in the first place, or the insurrection, all of that becomes kind of a wild card, because then the different courts and the different federal jurisdictions, even though all of the prosecutions will be handled by Jack Smith's team, will have to coordinate, at least on the scheduling front, with one another to see who's going to end up going first. I don't think there's any way to predict which case will go to trial first. I think a general view is that because the documents case in Florida was indicted first, there's a natural inclination to think it may go to trial first. But as you say, it really is up to the honor, ethics, and integrity of Judge Cannon. Is she going to cater to Trump and put the trial date way out in the future? or is she going to do the responsible thing and make sure everyone's right to a speedy trial is satisfied, not only Donald Trump's, but the American people's right to a speedy trial?
Yes, and one of the things I haven't had a chance to talk to you about was the whole Walt NADA of the situation, where they said that you guys aren't allowed to talk about the case, which I don't think any of us for a minute believe that's not happening. I mean, what's the old saying? Keep your friends close, your enemies closer, and your co-defendants right by your side at all time. That's what it feels like right now. What do you, what do you think is going on with Walt NADA? 'Cause, I mean, it took a while for him to find an attorney. I don't think having a Trump-approved attorney was the best move for him necessarily. What do you think? What's his situation right now? What kind of exposure does he have?
If Walt NADA gets conflict-free counsel, somebody who is really interested in zealously representing Walt NADA's rights instead of Donald Trump's rights, then I predict Walt NADA will plead guilty rather than go down with the SS Trump. Now, I'm not saying that his current defense team is not going to zealously represent Walt NADA. That remains to be seen. But this guy Woodward is, he's been involved with Trump flunkies for a very long time. So I look to the Cassidy Hutchinson situation as being instructive. She had a lawyer who was on Team Trump, and she was not being truthful with the J6 committee. She was protecting Trump. She got a different lawyer who represented her interests. All of a sudden, she started testifying truthfully about the crimes of Trump and others, and she came out of it okay. Because if she had kept towing the Trump line with that first attorney, she would have ended up a charged defendant in the conspiracy. So let's hope Walt NADA gets zealous representation that cares about his interests and not Donald Trump's.
Speaking of people who may be charged in this, the other big story that came out yesterday from New York Times was that we found out that Jared Kushner has been in front of the federal grand jury. Just first thoughts, what do you think about Jared going in there and testifying to them? Because he was, I remember from like the January 6th footage, he was, pardon my language, he was such a little bitch when he was in there talking to him, and just, you could just tell that he looked like, you people don't deserve to talk to me. What do you think? What do you think of him going in before the grand jury now?
Yeah, so I agree with you. When I saw that clip of him in the January 6th House Select Committee public hearings saying, look, when Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, a guy who appears to have retained some sense of ethics and integrity, kept threatening to resign because of what Donald Trump was doing, I just saw it as whining, and I didn't have time for it because I was busy getting as many pardons out as I could, including for his father.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Jared Kushner's father. So I agree with your assessment that he was a little you-know-what.
Bitch.
So here's the question.
I'll say it so you don't have to. He was a little bitch.
Here's the question. Does anybody think Jared Kushner told the truth to the grand jury? Now, I gave a spiel to every witness I put before the grand jury, especially if I thought they were loyal to the target of the investigation, the bad guy, the person we were intending to indict. I said, let me make you a promise. If you go into this grand jury and you lie, and that lie is about a material matter, that is a matter relevant to the grand jury's investigation, I promise you, I will ask this grand jury to consider indicting you for perjury, for obstructing justice, and as an accessory after the fact to the target's crimes. I urge you to tell the truth. Sometimes that had the desired effect and sometimes it didn't. But Travis, I hope Jared Kushner went in there and lied, because then he will be indicted for perjury, perhaps obstruction, perhaps accessory after the fact, perhaps as a member of Trump's conspiracy. I would rather see him held accountable for his crimes than have him as a potential witness against Donald Trump. But that's just me.
Yeah,